Everybody knows there's not a better time of year. Hear that sleigh, Santa's on his way. Hip hip parade for Christmas vacation. Got a ton of stuff.
Welcome to Buc'In, the news presented by the Pewtercast. This is our Buc'In the News episode for December the 23rd. It is Christmas weekend, so to anyone out there who celebrates Christmas, I want to say Merry Christmas. And if you're celebrating something else, Merry or Happy, whatever that might be, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, I don't really know what else is out there. If you don't celebrate anything at all, hey, happy regular, ordinary, everyday Saturday. But I am super excited. It is Christmas season. Christmas is my personal favorite holiday of the year. It's not just the day. I like the entire season and even the days that go beyond it. I am Brent Allen, your host. I am flying solo this week. Last week, Ren Daxt held down the fort while I was away in Puerto Rico, working on some hurricane relief. Had a couple of comedy shows and things like that down there. So he held down the fort, and this week it is my turn. Ren is out with his family, doing family stuff here over the holiday, and so I will be here talking to you guys about all the things that we do here on Buc'In the News. This is the third show that we do every week, although lately it's been the fourth podcast that we put out. We've lately been splitting our Final Thoughts episode between our grading out portion and our email portion. And hey, listen, it seems to be going okay. I'd love to hear some feedback from you guys. I've not heard any word back from you guys as to whether or not you like the split show or whether you'd prefer to have it together. We're just experimenting with it, trying to keep things, at a manageable, listenable time. So that's really the whole thought behind that. So if you've got thoughts, please feel free to email those in. Or if you've got comments, feedback on anything that we are doing all week long, you can always shoot us an email to thepewtercast@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter @thepewtercast or facebook.com/thepewtercast. We do respond to all forms of feedback, so we love getting to interact with everybody there. All right, so all that's out of the way. Buc'In the News. What is this show? This is the show where at the end of the week, we finally get a chance to sit down and talk about the transactions that have come out. We discuss the headlines that have happened over the course of the week. And we, of course, get to take a look at the injury report as we head into the game for the weekend. And we'll even do a little bit of predictive inactives, which is more of a fun thing. Everybody does the predictive score or predictive MVP on one side of the ball or the other. This one, specifically since we're talking about the injury report, to me, it's just a fun little thing, that we do. And it's always fun to see if we're right or not, at least for Ren and I it is. All right, so let's go ahead and jump on into it. We always start with the transactions report. And looking at the official transactions report on Buccaneers.com, it's actually not complete. They only list at the beginning of the week the team placing J.R. Sweezy and Vernon Hargraves on injured reserve. Now, I'm going to talk about those two guys here in just a moment. But the truth is the Bucs actually placed 5 different players on the injured reserve list earlier this week. Those 5 being Adarius Glanton, who he wound up having to have surgery the night of the Monday night game, broke his leg in a pretty bad way. Saw the pictures later. It was not good. It's one of those, you see the picture and you kind of get the tingle in your own belly. You're like, oh, that's not good. So thoughts and prayers out to Darius Glanton, and hope he gets better. This is the kind of injury to a player where Adarius is on the depth chart that it's potential that this could be his career. I hope it's not. I think it has the potential to. Just depends on how he comes back from it. So I hope he comes back. Darius is one of those guys that I like having on this team. He's never going to be the superstar, but he is a guy who, certainly has depth value, and you can trust when somebody goes down. And we did that this past week, having LaVonte David out. So Adarius Glanton was the first guy to go on injured reserve, and then J.R. Sweezy, who is listed on the official report. He also joined him. He went out with an injury in the game And, honestly, that's fine. I don't remember if we talked about this on the show earlier this week with the injuries that have happened to the offensive line. Our best five individuals are not on the field right now. And, even if you take your own personal opinion, the vast majority of us would say that DeMar Dotson, Ali Marpet are the two strongest offensive linemen, and they haven't been on the offensive line for the last couple of weeks because they have been shut down on IR as well. Now we have J.R. Sweezy, who is out. And so our offensive line looks like this. It looks like Donovan Smith, Kevin Pamphile solidly at the left guard spot, which is good. We have Joe Hawley, who will be in at center. We have Evan Smith, who will be at right guard because of Sweezy being out. And now we have Caleb Beninock on the right tackle side because of DeMar Dotson being out. That also is going to leave us with Leonard Wester and Michael Liedtke as our backup lineman. Now, we did sign, and I'll get to this in just a minute, we did sign a new guard to the active roster, Adam Geddes. Now, Ren is usually my research guy. He usually knows all the details behind these guys, but the Geddes move makes a whole lot of sense to me because Liedtke and Wester are both backup tackles. Now, we know that they cross-train our guys across the entire line, so those guys should be able to play guard should they be pressed into duty for that. However, they really are more tackles, so for them to sign a backup guard, that makes all the sense in the world in Adam Geddes. So that's going to be our offensive line. Now, here's the strange thing. I think these last couple of weeks has been our offensive line some of their best games. And I think a big piece of it is the fact that we no longer have a rotating position out there. And for whatever reason, I don't know if it's just psychological, if somebody's just stepped up. I can't even say it's Joe Hawley because I think that the offensive line was playing better before Joe Hawley became the full-time center after J.R. Sweezy went down. Now, I don't know what has happened to make this offensive line play better. And now I'm going to say this out there. I cannot say that I have gone back and rewatched the game tape to verify what I've been saying. It's just a feeling that I've had in watching the game. Looking at and maybe it's with Peyton Barber now being in there and, seeing something better come out of him these last couple of games. I don't really know what it is, but it seems to me to be that way. For whatever reason, the offensive line has, I think, been playing better with these five guys. So I'm not incredibly worried about what's going on there, especially, we're only 2 weeks left in the season, right? So we've got this game and then one more game to get through, and we'll see what happens come next season. So J.R. Sweezy also joining the injured reserve list. The next morning, we also found out that Vernon Hargreaves is being shut down for the year. Now, he's been out for the last bunch of weeks. It's probably at this point been 4 or 5 weeks. I think twice we have seen him back on the practice field. They've tried bringing him back, and he's had some sort of a setback. So for them to shut him down and just say, hey, listen, it's two more weeks left in the year. We'll figure it out. You get rest. You get healthy. You come back strong next year. We'll talk more about Vernon in our headlines section here. So, it's one of those, do I like it? No, I don't like seeing players go on injured reserve. We're at this point, am I trying to protect him? No, listen, he's just not going to get it. He's just not going to get better for, to make it worth him coming back to play before the end of the season. So, put him on IR. That's fine. We also learned later that O.J. Howard is being put on injured reserve. We know that O.J. Howard, he scored that touchdown and came up limping pretty hardcore. I saw later video of Jameis actually had to help O.J. off the field, and O.J. was trying to get to the trainer's table, but Deshaun Jackson was already laid out on it, so he had to wait in line. So I don't fully know exactly what's going on with O.J. We do know that it is an ankle injury for him, but we will see. We'll see what happens. This one feels to me a lot more like they're protecting. There's just no reason for them to bring him back. He's had a good rookie season. Let's get him healthy, bring him back next year because this guy is going to be a stud. Justin Evans, same thing. We also found out that he is placed on IR. So if you guys are keeping track of that, that's Darius Glanton, J.R. Sweezy, Vernon Hargreaves, O.J. Howard, and Justin Evans. Several of those guys are young on the team. And it's, that's just a hard row to go road to sow. I don't know what's the phrase there. It's just a hard road to travel for sure because we now have to fill all of those spots. So with that, looking at the transaction report, I'm sorry, a couple of moves that the Bucs made to the active roster. Okay, I'm speaking specifically to the active roster. Off of our practice squad, we've signed linebacker Nigel Harris, defensive lineman Channing Ward, and safety Isaiah Johnson. Now, you may be looking at those going, wait a minute, there's a linebacker, a defensive lineman, and a safety, but the people that we placed on IR were a guard, a cornerback, a tight end. Okay, there is a safety. What exactly is going on there? And then there is actually, I guess, is another linebacker with a Darius Clanton. But we're seeing these guys come up. Also signed straight to the active roster is a cornerback. So there's your extra person for Vernon with David Rivers, and there's the guard for Adam Geddes. We did sign a few people back to our practice squad. We have Devin Lucen, who is in the practice squad now. A name that should be familiar to all of you, fullback Austin Johnson was signed to the practice squad. He's been around the team quite a bit, was with the team certainly through training camp, and we never really thought he would get signed to the active roster coming out of training camp because the team doesn't generally just carry a straight-up fullback. We have Alan Cross, who's kind of a mix there. We also did sign another offensive lineman, Avery Young, to the practice squad. So I'm not going to dwell too much on the practice squad guys, but Isaiah Johnson was a guy that he's been around the team this whole year. To sign him, now missing Justin Evans. We also know that TJ Ward last week went out, I think, with another concussion yet again. And TJ Ward, let's face it, guys, he's been underwhelming this year. He really has, and he's not been the stud that we all thought he was going to be when he came in. So, we're looking at Chris Conte. Now, listen, I'm going to say this about Chris Conte. I was at the game this last Monday, and the people behind were like, "Oh, there's Chris Conte. There's Conte's not doing anything." Listen, Conte's having a really good year, y'all. Now he's not a superstar. Conte isn't out there, shutting everything down and dominating everything. But let me tell you what, he's a workhorse. He's done everything we've asked him to do, and he has made some big plays, and he's come up with some big stops. So, people say what they want. I'm glad right now that Chris Conte's on this team, because if he wasn't, we'd probably be looking at J.J. Wilcox, and I'm not really sure what's going on there. So anyway, we also got Keith Tandy, who's still around, who we haven't really seen a whole lot out of him this whole year. And when we have, it's been nothing major. So, we'll see. We'll see what happens when we come here. I fully expect we'll probably be looking at Conte and Tandy, unless Ward is ready to go, which Ward's not even on the injury report. Here's a spoiler alert, not even on the injury report. So he'll probably, be fully ready to go. But we might even see Tandy and Conte, it'd be Tandy and Ward probably rotating out, and Conte will be in there, throughout most of the game, if I had to guess. We see that Isaiah Johnson, he's getting up. Channing Ward's a guy who's been in and out of this team for years, guys. Years. I'm not even really sure how he still has practice squad eligibility, to tell you the truth. But he's coming in. We know that Robert Ayers, he was injured last week, so that makes all the sense in the world, trying to bolster that defensive line, which, has also been, unfortunately, underperforming this year. So that is our transaction report. So those will be some guys to be on the lookout for. Let's see if they make any splash plays for what they could do. All right, moving on. This is where we talk about the headlines of the week. This is kind of my favorite part. I really wish that I had Ren here, because these are fun to kind of bounce back and forth off each other. But one of the things I like about this is, you get these reports that come out throughout the week, but then something may happen the next day that actually changes your story or adds something more to it. This really gives us a chance to look at the complete story, at least as we know it, over the course of the entire week. Now, that said, a couple of things that did come out. Of course, the big one this week, the biggest one, the one that everybody's talking about, Gerald McCoy is elected to his 6th Pro Bowl. LaVonte David, who I don't think anyone would disagree he should be in the Pro Bowl, was, I hesitate to use the word snubbed. yet again, as much as he was robbed. And, LaVonte David should be in the Pro Bowl. LaVonte David would be there. And I don't think Gerald McCoy would mind me actually spending more time talking about LaVonte than I am him. Hey, by the way, Gerald, I know you listen to every single episode of the Pewtercast. Congratulations. And you're one step closer to chasing that ghost. So big ups to you. But LaVonte, listen, guys, LaVonte deserves it. LaVonte should be in. And the reason he's not, as it has been explained to us, is because of how they lump the outside linebacker together in the different systems, but those really aren't the same position. And, in one system, it just gives that guy a whole lot bigger numbers, and that's just not the system we're in. So things get flashy, but, it's just something different. So, unfortunately, it's the way the system works. I don't necessarily know that it's LaVonte got snubbed as much as he's just a victim of how the Pro Bowl voting works. So, but I think in all of our hearts, we all know LaVonte David should be in the Pro Bowl. Let's hear other headlines that were out there. One of the things that I found peculiarly interesting is everybody this week, there were multiple articles, so I'm not going to point to all of them, but multiple articles singing Jameis's praises this week. There's been a lot to do this week, or over the course of the season, I'm sorry. There's been a lot to do over the course of the season as to whether or not Jameis has regressed, or is Jameis progressing fast enough, Jameis's decision-making ability, Jameis is this, Jameis is that. It's very interesting to me that he comes out and he has a really, really good game. Amazing game. Really against Monday Night Football, and everybody seems to be like, hey, look, Jameis is like the best thing. We told you he was great. Now, I am personally on that train. Yes, I think Jameis is great. This is exactly what we've known we could expect out of Jameis, what we saw from him. And Ren and I actually talked a little bit on an earlier episode about whether or not that this might have actually been Jameis's best game of his career, despite it maybe not being statistically his best. I think statistically it's like his third best, but we talk about why this was actually better than some of those other ones. So you go back and listen to that. However, everybody else just seems to be singing his praises, and I think that's good. I like that. I just find it funny that, it's after one game, the tune can change for so many people. So, let's hear more on Vernon Hargraves. Let's talk about him for just a second. Mike Smith in his press conference earlier this week said that, and this was, of course, in response to placing Vernon on IR. He said that he thinks that Hargraves has the mental makeup that he can make a strong return. Listen, first of all, I think for a lot of Bucs fans, the words of Mike Smith are a little bit suspect these days. Vernon himself has said he hasn't had a super great year, but he has had, I think he's had a better year than people give him credit for. I saw on social media somewhere where somebody had a picture of Vernon saying, he's a bust. No, listen, Vernon's not a bust. First of all, guys, look, here's the deal. We don't have enough data points to declare somebody a bust, okay? He caught a lot of slack through the first bunch of games because he was playing so many yards off the ball, off of a receiver. However, if you go back and look, you will see that the person in this team who plays the left side cornerback that Vernon does, okay, so Ryan Smith has been doing the same thing. They play that far off the ball. Like, they play within this window, all right? That's coaching, that's scheme, that's design. Vernon's playing where he's supposed to. And Mike Smith came out and said, well, they've got a window of where they can play, which I understand that. And, I'm not going to fault him. Now, was Vernon having a good year? No, he wasn't. But let me tell you what. We all saw Vernon move down to nickel. And everybody's like, oh, well, you can't draft a nickel in the first round. That's not a good pick. Listen, he's a good player, and we might have found a good spot for him. But I understand what you're saying. I fully understand what you're saying. Now, the one game, and again, you only have one game as a sample size for this. Brent Grimes was out. Vernon kicked out to the right side linebacker. And let me tell you what, it was a pretty damn good game. I'm actually excited to see Vernon move back to the outside, and I want to see him on that side. I'd like to see what Vernon can do. I think he had a really good game that game, and I'd like to see more. Unfortunately, they kicked him back to the nickel. He's played great as the nickel. He was shutting people down on his nickel spot until he got his injury. And, I think there's a lot more to come from Vernon. What I'm just saying here is I'm not saying that Vernon is going to be amazing, that he's going to have a long career, and he's going to be a very great player in this league. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that there is enough where the jury is still out. Yes, he had a bad first part of the season. A lot of that was on him. I think a lot of that was also on scheme, or at least how he's coached. And, let's face it, he's playing in not the best defense in the league right now. You know what I'm saying? We talk about this all the time. The defense especially is one of those, it is the side of the ball where the entire unit has to work together. And if you're not generating a pass rush, which we know we haven't been all year long, if you're not stopping the run, which we've been better at but still not great at all year long, that's going to make things that much more difficult in your secondary. And if your secondary is not, covering their guys, doing what they need to do, it's going to make things more difficult on your guys up front doing a pass rush. Okay, so Vernon's not been playing in the best situation. When we did eventually move him, he played better. And then he's been injured. So, people that want to declare Vernon a bust, I don't really know what you want. Mike Smith says that Vernon has the mental capacity to make a strong return. Awesome. That doesn't surprise me. I think we've seen that. I just would like to see him back, and I'm okay to wait till next year. I'm okay to not see him back this year. I'm okay to wait till next year. So yeah, there's that. Let's hear other headlines. I've got one that I want to spend a little bit of time on. That's all. Bucs playing on Christmas Eve. So Merry Christmas to everybody here. 1 o'clock, just so you guys know that, 1 o'clock. I will say this. As of right now, and I say right now, as of right now, we are planning on having the instant cast at our normal time. Now, stay tuned. That may change in the moment because it is Christmas Eve. It is family, okay? And so we're going to kind of play it a little bit by ear. But as of right now, we are looking to just keep the instant cast in the same time, which would be 9 o'clock on Sunday night after a 1 o'clock game. So just a heads up on that. All right, final thing I want to talk about on the headlines before we look over into the injury report and get out of here. If you guys haven't seen it, Trevor Sikkema, his cover 3, pewterreport.com. This is an article that a series that has been talked about all season long. And because it's really good, if you guys aren't reading it over there, I would suggest going to read it. If there's no offense to Scott or Mark, I love you guys, but if there's one article a week that you should be reading at Pewter Report, I think it's the cover 3. Some people might say it's SR's Fab 5. I think it's cover 3. And no shade to Scott. The work he puts on the Fab 5 is phenomenal. But the cover 3 that Trevor does, it's just so good. It's just, and it's based on, Scott's stuff tends to be a lot more analytical, a lot more anecdotal, where Trevor's is a lot of tape and a lot of data and a lot of backup to draw conclusions. That said, his article, or at least the first part of his article, one of his cover 3 pieces, focused on Dirk Cutter. And what he did was he went back and he looked at the history of Dirk, not here with the Bucs, but with all his other teams. And he tracked, so what has Dirk Cutter's MO been? Has there been a trend line? Has there been something that has been repeated that we can recognize that you could reasonably use to make a prediction as to what's going to happen? Because believe it or not, Bucs fans, there are still people out there who think that Dirk Cutter should get another year. There are some people who think he should get the full run of his contract. And then there are some people who think he should be fired immediately after the game on December the 31st. There are some people who think he should have been fired weeks ago. All right. So Trevor went out and just said, hey, let's look and see. Let's look and see what happens. And I'm not going to give you all the details of it because I want you to go back and read it. But basically, what he shows is, historically speaking, with Dirk Koetter and his coaching, that his teams tend to have a big pop in Koetter's first year. For whatever reason, they have a really good first year. But then after that, it goes downhill, and it goes downhill, and it goes downhill. Now, that's the trend line. That was when Dirk was at Atlanta. That's when he was in Jacksonville. That's when he was in, a couple of other places. And it looks to be like that could be what's happening here in Tampa Bay. And so, you can draw your conclusion and say, well, maybe that's another nail in the coffin of why the Glazers should fire Dirk Koetter. I really appreciate this kind of work because it takes the data, it puts it in its context. You look and see what it says, you see similarities, and you bring it to your current context, and you say, hey, listen, if he did that time and time again, you could probably reasonably assume that that's going to happen here. And, to say that the Bucs had a big pop in Dirk Koetter's first year would not be an understatement. It might be a little bit of an overstatement, though. That's the only exception that I would take to this. Because, listen, guys, the truth is without a couple of interceptions by Keith Tandy last year, the Bucs 9-7 real quick turns into 7-9, maybe even 6-10. Okay? Last year felt so great at the end of the season because for the first time we had a winning season, right? We had a winning record. First time in a long time. Woohoo! And we were a hair's breadth from getting into the playoffs. So, all that sounds great. But guys, don't forget, first part of the season we went 3-5 and people were losing their minds. And then we went on a big 5-game winning streak, which was really cool. And then we closed out the season to 1-3. We only won 1 out of our last 3. So, and it was cool. And the one we won was the end of the season. And so that sent the Bucs off on a big high note, right? This year it looks like we're probably going to go 4-12, maybe 5-11. I doubt it's going to be 6-10. So truthfully, maybe Koetter has stayed level. Maybe he's stayed kind of even. But of course, it's not just team record. Trevor also looked at the offense and where the offense placed, scoring offense, yardage offense, all those kinds of things. The numbers do show that there tends to be a spike, there tends to be a pop, and then things go downhill from there. Now, that said, that is history, and that is something to be aware of. Do I think that means that Dirk Koetter should be fired, or does that mean that Dirk Koetter is going to continue to go downhill here in Tampa Bay? Not necessarily, is what I would say. Okay, the thing that Trevor does when he writes this article is he just puts the data out there and says, this is what the data is. Draw your own conclusion. And the conclusion that, if listening to Trevor over the course of this year, I think he's trying to help people get to a certain conclusion, which would be that Koetter's not the guy, so the Bucs do need to move on from him. And if, as Trevor often says, if he's not your guy, he's not your guy. You got to move on. You can't just sit and spin your wheels if he's not the guy. And I think Trevor is trying to build that argument that Koetter is just not the guy. No offense against Coach Koetter personally. And Trevor makes a really good case. Personally, I still say that when you bring a coach in, okay, and this isn't just Coach Koetter. I think in general, you bring a coach in, you give them a 5-year contract. There's a reason you give them a 5-year contract, and you need to give them their 5 years. Okay, I don't believe in just. I think there's very few exceptions for why you cut a coach's contract short, and I don't think that any of those exceptions have been reached with Coach Koetter yet. I just don't. If you want to hear what some of those exceptions are, way back in episode 3 of the Pewtercast, way back there, episode 303. It's called A Fans Only Meeting was the name of the episode. I detailed those things out. Now, That said, I don't believe that the Glazers should fire Coach Cutter at the end of this year. I think Coach Cutter should come back. I don't think that just because this has been a history thing of trend lines, that necessarily means that it's going to continue here in Tampa Bay. Although what that does mean is I'm now watching it to see if it does. It certainly seems to be continuing here in Tampa Bay, but I'd be interested to see if that can turn around. And like I said, I just don't think that Dirk Cutter has done the few things that should actually initiate a coaching firing. I just don't. So if you guys want more on why I think that way, or if you disagree with me, shoot me an email, pewtercast@gmail.com. Hit me up on Twitter @thepewtercast. Would love to have that conversation with you. But really good work on Trevor's part. Really, really good work on Trevor's part. All right. That's really all the headlines for this week. So why don't we go ahead and look over at the injury report and we'll get out of here. I'll start over on the Carolina Panthers. They have a guard who is out with a concussion, Trey Turner. So he will be out. As far as other guys who are on the injury report, people of note, Devin Funchess, wide receiver. He did not participate earlier this week, was limited today. He is listed as questionable. Shaq Thompson, who is a linebacker, he was limited all week, so I would expect him to play. But also of note, Russell Shepard, former Buccaneer wide receiver and special teams captain, did not participate earlier in the week, was limited in his participation. As I understand it, Russell Shepard is a deep wide receiver on their team, more of a special teams guy, so we may or may not see him. But I would probably expect him to be active for this game against the Buccaneers. With that, other than that, everybody else who was on their injury report was all full participation. Greg Olsen was full participation all week. Cam Newton he's listed as a right shoulder injury, but he was full participation. Julius Peppers, Mike Adams, so I'll be there. All right, let's get to the Buccaneers. Leading off the injury report, Robert Ayers, Deshaun Jackson did not participate all week, and they will be out with their respective injuries. Ryan Smith, cornerback, was limited in his participation all week, but he is listed as doubtful. Doubtful in the new system means probably will not play. So I'm going to go ahead and just mark him as out. They may try to sneak him in there at the end, but I wouldn't look for it to happen, especially not this late in the season. This is the part of the season where those arguments, you do have to have is it worth risking the player to bring them back right now? This is the time where those are legit concerns. So anyway, there's those three. Also on the injury report, but was at full participation all week and will absolutely play, was Donovan Smith with a shoulder injury, but he was full participation all week. All right, there are four more guys, Cameron Brate, LaVonte David, Gerald McCoy, and Ryan Russell. These guys are all our guys who are listed as questionable. Ryan Russell was listed limited later in the week, so this tells me this was probably something that happened during practice this week, but he'll be questionable. He will go, especially with Robert Ayers being out. He will absolutely go. Cameron Brate, who I've said he's looking more and more ragged as the season goes on. He has a knee and a hip injury, was limited all week. He is questionable, so I would actually expect to see him go, especially considering the fact that the Buccaneers did nothing on their transactions to bolster the tight end. Cam's going to go. He's a tough guy. He's absolutely going to go. The big question marks to me are Gerald McCoy and LaVonte David. Those two guys specifically because there are stars. There are stars. LaVonte David has a hamstring, which we know that those things can be lingering. We certainly don't want a hamstring to be something that carries over later into next year, or something worse happens. So LaVonte David, he is listed as questionable. He was limited in his participation. I actually expect to see LaVonte go, but don't be surprised if he's a late last minute scratch. And that could happen there. Gerald McCoy, on the other hand, had a big bicep injury a couple of weeks ago, I think during the Lions game. He was limited earlier this week and was full participation on Friday. He will go. Now, this is a guy that, I've heard people asking, why is he going? It's late in the year. He's got a biceps injury. Don't risk further injury to it. Let's go. And I'm going to apply to this the same logic that I applied to Jameis Winston's injury from earlier this year. If his bicep injury is 100% healed and he's ready to go, then yes, I think he needs to go out and play. The season is not over. We have played 14 of 16 games. We have 2 games left. Regardless of what our record is, he needs to go. Now, that said, the Bucs are out of the playoffs. These games matter only for pride. And because of that, if he is less than 100%, then I think he should sit. Now, I'm not the coach. I'm not the guys who declare this. And here's what worries me about all this. Cutter sits there and says, well, if the medical guys say that they're clear to play, then I'm going to play him. And it's like he puts these blinders on, and he sticks his fingers in his ears to everything else, and he goes, blah, 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 blah. They're cleared, I'm going to play them. They're cleared, I'm going to play them. And I get why he's like that, but it's really like that he's just kind of absolving himself of any responsibility of the whole deal. And I'm not for that. That it's a thing, that's a medical decision. That's not me. If they're cleared, I won't play them. No. Listen, you need to be a part of that decision. Okay. We know that, Cam Brate. All right, let's talk about him. Cam Brate is not going to be 100% going into this game, but he's going to play. He's going to be medically cleared. All right. But Cam Brate also wasn't sat out for a game or two with these injuries that he's had. Okay. Gerald McCoy was. Gerald McCoy is a star. Now, you could make the argument Cameron Brate is a star. I wouldn't argue with you on it, to be honest with you. But Gerald McCoy, this is an old injury for him as well. Okay. So, to me, if he's 100% healthy, ready to go, then yeah, go ahead, let him play. Actually, he should play. But if he's not, then I don't think he needs to play. It's not worth it. Not worth it. Not worth it. Not worth it. So that's my opinion on that. Again, if you have anything you want to add to that, tweet me, or Facebook me, or email me. You can do that. All right, closing out the show, this is the part where we do our predictive inactives. We have 7 inactives that come out every single week. We already know 2 of them are going to be Robert Ayers and Deshaun Jackson. I'm also going to say that Ryan Smith is going to be out. Remember, he was doubtful for earlier this game. So that leaves me with 4 guys that we need. One of the easy ones to always pick is going to be Ryan Griffin. They're not going to activate 3 quarterbacks. I still think that I think it will be Ryan Griffin who they inactivate, but I think it should be Ryan Fitzpatrick. I'd like to see Griffin out there, see what he can do, especially this late in the year. With that, let's hear. Who else could potentially be there? I am going to go with offensive lineman Michael Liedtke. And the reason I'm going with Michael Liedtke is because we have Leonard Wester also on the team as a backup offensive lineman. Michael Liedtke is also backup offensive lineman. They are both backup tackles. We need a backup guard, and that guy that we signed, Adam Geddes. So I think that it's going to be Geddes and Wester who are backing up the other 5 offensive linemen, which is going to set Liedtke. So I think he will pull up our number, 5 spot. I think Isaiah Johnson will probably be sitting as well. I think he will be inactive because I think TJ Ward is going to come out and play in between Conti and Ward and Tandy. They'll have the pieces they need for that. Oh, they also have Josh Robinson. He's also listed as a safety should they need him there. So they have that. Now that leaves me with one more guy, and the person I'm going to go up with is another guy that they signed to the active roster off of the practice squad, linebacker Nigel Harris. Listen, guys, if LaVonte's coming back, even with the Darius Glanton gone, I don't think that, they still have Devontae Bond. They have Quan Alexander. They have Kendall Beckwith. I don't know that they're going to carry 5 linebackers into this game. So I think they'll carry the 4. It'll be Quan, LaVonte, Kendall Beckwith, and then they'll have the other guy I just mentioned. Oh, Devontae Bond. He'll be the other linebacker that'll be on the team. So that will be it. That is going to wrap up Buck in the News. Once again, email us to thepewtercast@gmail.com, Facebook and Twitter @thepewtercast. Would love to discuss that with you. Thank you for joining me. I think we can all agree the show is way better when we have two co-hosts. So Ren will be back with us next week with what might actually wind up being our final Buck in the News for the year. That we'll have that. So I want to wish everybody, once again, a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy whatever else you may or may not celebrate. And to end today's show, I'm actually going to play you one of my favorite songs of the season, the Christmas Can Can.
Christmas time is here, and Christmas songs you love to hear. Thoughts of joy and hope and cheer, but mostly shopping. Christmas time is here. The sleigh bells and the red-nosed deer. Songs and songs we love to hear, all played 1,000 times each year. Heard this same song 20 times, and it's only Halloween. It's not even cold outside. Christmas time is here, and Christmas songs you love to hear. Thoughts of joy and hope and cheer, but mostly shopping. Christmas season starting sooner every year. It's October. Stores with plastic Christmas trees. Ransack the mall. Shop until you lose your mind. Spike the eggnog. Sit back and watch Rudolph, Frosty, and Scrooge, or Charlie Brown. It's time. It's time to do the Christmas can. If you can't dance, well that's okay.
Not going to do the kick line.
All you need is a tree, some lights, about 1,000 presents. Wrap them up and pray for snow. Run to your closet, find your Christmas sweater, screaming carols all the way. Maine, all the way to California, it's the Christmas can, Halloween to Christmas Day. It's the most wonderful time of year, we're running mad with Christmas cheer.
Hey, what's troubling you, my friend?
It's not fair if you're Jewish.
Not fair if you're Jewish. Dreidel, I made it out of clay.
You realize that Christmas ain't the only holiday.
Hey, he's right, who made these laws? Look, wait, here comes Santa Claus. Santa Claus. Hey, Santa, do the can. Help them if you can. Join in the parade.
I'm gonna go grab some Chinese food.
All you need is a tree, some lights, about 1,000 presents. Wrap them up and pray for snow. Run to your closet, find your Christmas sweater, screaming carols all the way. France, all the way to Indiana, it's the Christmas can, that's the end.
Wait, for our ending, we should share this holiday.
Havana, Gila, happy Hanukkah to you.
A happy Hanukkah to you.
A happy Hanukkah to you. A Merry Christmas, Hanukkah, and also Kwanzaa. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and Merry Kwanzaa to